Welcome to another episode of African Mental Models. Tonight's discussion brings together two central figures in Uganda's post-colonial history, Milton Obote and Idi Amin. Milton Obote rose through civilian politics to become Uganda's first prime minister at independence and later its first president. His leadership was marked by efforts to centralize authority, weaken traditional power structures, and govern through constitutional control, often at the cost of political consensus. Idi Amin rose through the military ranks to seize power from Obote in a 1971 coup. A career soldier, he ruled through force, patronage, and intimidation, dismantling civilian institutions and placing the army at the center of political life. Their rivalry shaped Uganda's institutions, its relationship with violence, and its understanding of legitimacy. In this discussion, they confront enduring questions: whether order comes from the ballot or the gun, whether law restrains power or merely serves it, and whether elections legitimize authority or disguise domination.
Let's start with something simple. A country is not built by the army. The army can seize power in a night, yes, but building a nation takes years of trust, rules, and predictable authority. Soldiers are trained to obey orders, not to negotiate legitimacy. Once the gun becomes the highest argument, every institution beneath it becomes decoration.
You speak like a man who never had to hold a collapsing state together. Banange, when the country is trembling, rumors everywhere, factions everywhere, people scared, speeches don't stabilize anything. In that moment, someone must act. Order is not a theory. Order is the difference between a market opening tomorrow or burning tonight.
Order matters, but order without law is temporary. If people are quiet only because they are afraid, then you have not governed. You have paused the conflict. A state is strong when even those who oppose it still trust the rules. Without rules, power becomes personal, kati. And personal power always demands more force to sustain itself.
And law without control is a performance. A constitution cannot stop a mutiny. A court cannot stop a riot. Paper cannot hold a country together when the center is weak. First, you secure the ground. Then you talk about principles. If you reverse that order, you get beautiful laws and a broken country.
You call yourself a solution, but you were a symptom of a state where the gun became more credible than the Constitution. And yes, I'll admit civilians helped create that reality. We politicized institutions. We treated power like survival. But the answer to fragile civilian rule is not military rule. It's stronger civilian institutions. An army's logic is simple: command, obedience, punishment. A nation is harder: bargaining, compromise, legitimacy, and limits. Once soldiers taste political power, they stop being a neutral instrument. They become a political class, with interests, allies, enemies, and appetites.
And civilians are angels? Civilians steal quietly. Soldiers steal loudly. That is the only difference.
No, the difference is accountability.
Accountability is easy to demand when the men with guns already answer to you. When I took power, the country was tense and divided. People feared the center, feared the kingdoms, feared each other. You were building a state that many felt was being forced on them. So the army became the instrument, because it was the only instrument that could move fast. You talk about institutions. Fine. But institutions take time, and time is a luxury when the streets are hot and the barracks are restless. When people believe the system is rigged, when rumors are stronger than courts, nae, the army becomes the referee. And referees, my friend, do not wait for permission from politicians.
The moment the army becomes the referee, the match is already corrupted.
You crushed the kingdoms because they competed with you.
I confronted a constitutional contradiction. You cannot build a unified republic while allowing parallel sovereignties that command deeper loyalty than the state.
You feared Buganda more than you feared poverty.
I feared fragmentation. You cannot run a country as a collection of rival courts. Democracy is not merely voting. It is agreement on who has authority and how power transfers. At independence, power was divided. A central government and kingdoms with historical legitimacy strong enough to challenge it. That settlement was unstable. When competition rises, identity hardens. Region becomes a substitute for policy. Royalty, a substitute for accountability. A monarchy can stabilize identity, yes, but it can also become a veto over national authority. My error was underestimating how deeply people wanted the state to recognize their identity without surrendering the state to it. But the principle remains. Sovereignty cannot be shared by rival centers forever.
And the cost was violence.
Yes.
Then don't call it democracy. You wanted one sovereignty because it made you stronger. Monarchies survive because they understand something politicians often ignore. People want symbols that outlast elections. When politicians fail, people return to older loyalties, not because they hate the state, but because they want protection and belonging. In my time, I used whatever kept the country quiet. Religion, region, even royal sentiment when it served stability. Was it noble? No. But politics is not a church. Politics is containment.
Containment without principle becomes opportunism.
Principle without control becomes burial speeches.
You normalized violence as governance.
And you never truly rejected violence. You wanted it centralized, disciplined, and politically useful.
There is a difference between force under law and force above law.
To the man being beaten, the difference feels theoretical.
I won't pretend my era was bloodless. It wasn't. But the question is not whether force exists. It always does. The question is whether force is constrained. Rule of law means the state binds itself. It can punish, yes, but through procedure, so that power becomes predictable. Predictability is what allows markets, civic life, and trust to form. Once violence becomes arbitrary, citizens stop investing in the future. They invest in protection, patrons, tribes, weapons, exits. A state can survive years on fear, banange, but it cannot build prosperity on fear.
Prosperity is not the first need. Survival is.
And survival without a future is just slow collapse.
You speak as if law is neutral. It is not. Law is written by whoever controls the center, and the center is always threatened. Foreign interests watch, internal rivals plot, loyalists demand reward. So I made the state feared, because fear reduces conspiracy. People say, he is brutal. Yes, brutality is a language. When institutions are weak, brutality becomes the shortcut to obedience. Is it stable? Only for as long as the fear stays believable.
And when fear weakens, the whole structure shakes.
You wanted elections because you could manage them.
I wanted constitutional legitimacy.
And you learned legitimacy can be manufactured.
And you learned legitimacy can be ignored. Elections are a test, not only of popularity, but of institutional honesty. When the state controls the commission, the police, the courts, and the media environment, elections become theatre. People may still vote, but the outcome is shaped by the architecture around the vote. Once citizens believe that, the ballot loses meaning. Politics then shifts from persuasion to intimidation. People stop asking, who has the best plan, and start asking, who can protect me? That is how elections become the doorway to dictatorship, without a single tank in the street.
Or the doorway out of it, if the state miscalculates and loses control.
Exactly. That's why rigging is always a gamble.
Let me tell you something you won't like. When an election becomes tight, power rarely waits politely for polling day. It moves earlier. It tightens public space, leans on organizers, pressures gatekeepers, rewards loyalty, warns dissent. Everything is justified as keeping peace. Sometimes it prevents chaos. Sometimes it manufactures it. And then come the technical rituals, new rules, new procedures, new verification, presented as integrity. Those tools can reduce fraud, yes, but tools cannot replace trust when the political environment is already hostile. Trust is not a system you install, Kale. It's a relationship you maintain.
That's the problem with shortcuts. They save time today and cost you legitimacy tomorrow. If Uganda teaches anything, it's this. The decisive struggle is rarely the vote itself. It's who sets the boundaries before the vote, who can assemble, who can speak, who is protected, who is punished, which disputes are heard, which are delayed. A ballot paper is a small piece of governance. The larger machinery is administration, courts, policing, and narrative. When that machinery becomes partisan, elections stop being competition and become confirmation. And once citizens conclude outcomes are decided elsewhere, they either withdraw or they seek power outside the ballot.
So you agree the system can shape the result?
I agree the environment can make the result meaningless.
Then don't be shocked when people stop believing in civilian rule.
And don't be shocked when military solutions become permanent diseases.
You still believe civilian rule is the answer?
Yes, civilian rule with constraints strong enough to survive ambition.
And if ambition refuses?
Then the country repeats our cycle, just with new slogans and better suits.
So what breaks the cycle?
Institutions that cannot be bent, and a public that stops treating power like a person.